some of these stories include, like, actually include that picture of Springtrap and MATPAT being, like, pregnant. Like, that actually freaking happens in one of the stories. It's not MATPAT, but, like, is this, wait, what's his name? Hang on a second, I'm gonna look this up. If his name is Matt, I'm gonna freaking flip out. His name is Matt. Oh my god. Oh my god. There's no way that's not intentional. Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to another discussions video. Now, we're mixing things up a little bit. For the past, since May, we've been doing nothing but FNAF rewrite videos, so we're mixing it up a little bit and taking like a one discussion video break and doing something a little bit different. So as you could probably tell based on the title and the thumbnail, today we're going to be talking about some of the major problems and issues with a majority slash some of the more like well-known and important FNAF books. So we won't be covering every FNAF book because I haven't read every FNAF book, but we'll be covering kind of like most of the important ones. So that's the plan for today, and this video is kind of like the fifth, not part, but like a fifth video and a little bit of a mini series we've been kind of doing on the channel that I haven't done anything with in like since March, and that is a like problems with series. So it's fun to come back to this one. And yeah, so with that being said, we're gonna kind of just jump right on into things. We're not gonna really waste any time on this intro. I want to get right into the topic, so we'll start off the video with talking about some rules, I guess you could say, slash kind of like what to expect in this video. So we'll start with that. All right, so I'm gonna keep this section relatively quick because I know you guys are here to, learn and listen to my thoughts about the books, and that's why I'm here. So I'll keep this section as quick as I can. Basically, how this video is going to go is that picture it as kind of like 4 mini videos combined into one, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna go through a handful of series slash an individual book and kind of just explain them from there. So the 3 main things we're covering are the novel trilogy, Fazbear Frights, and then Tales from the Pizzaplex. And then at the very end, we're going to tag on the character encyclopedia and do a little bit of like a review slash here's some of the craziest things I found in the book kind of a thing. So like I said, picture it as kind of like 4 mini videos combined into one, because they're all going to go through kind of individually through each of these sections. So how this is going to go, I already listed off the order, but basically I want to talk about some of the major, obviously, problems that arise from these books, and that is a result of stuff like characters being introduced, concepts being introduced, and just stuff like that. Stories, characters, concepts, ideas that got introduced in these book series and then either later got introduced into the games or just influenced the games in some way, shape, or form. And not everything is going to be strictly fully negative. There will be a few teeny weeny small positives maybe sprinkled throughout here, but most of it is going to be negative. I wouldn't have called it the problems with if it was going to be overly positive. So that's going to be kind of the plan. And like I said, we'll start with the novel trilogy and then we'll go from there. And Tales from the Pizzaplex is going to be a little bit different than the other one. So to be honest with you guys, I haven't read Tales from the Pizzaplex. Well, I've read one story, but I haven't read all of Tales from the Pizzaplex. So I don't feel it's right if I criticized it fully and talked about it fully, since I don't know everything and I haven't read it. So I can't pass off my full judgment on the series if I haven't actually taken the time to go through and read it. I just think it's fair that I don't. However, I do still know a fair bit about it, and I want to talk about the whole what was it called? whatever the Tales from the Pizza Plex canonicity stuff, which is confirmed to be not canon anymore. But I wanted to talk about that and the whole fiasco around that as well. So that's going to kind of be the Tales from the Pizza Plex section, and then everything else is going to be kind of how I explained it. So yeah, with that being said, this section's over. We'll move into the actual thing here, and we'll start with the novel trilogy. And yeah, I hope that you enjoy the show. All right, so the FNAF novel trilogy. I would say I'm a little bit of an expert on this topic. I've read all 3 books, and I've also made 3 rewrite videos on said books. So I think I know at least a little bit about what I'm talking about when it comes to these 3 books. And so basically, I want to try to keep this section short and concise. Well, you know, everything, but I'm going off track. So I want to keep this relatively short and concise and kind of just go over the few things I want to talk about, which is mostly characters and how these characters from the books were added into the games in a not so well established way, except for like William Afton, but we'll get there. And then I also want to bring up some of the more wild and wacky concepts that get introduced in the books, and then how that's affected people's like theory creation and stuff like that when it comes to like the games and newer games. So it's really just like, how have the books affected the games is really what this is about. So that being said, let's start talking about with some of these introductions, some of these characters, and some of these concepts. So character wise, we got a ton of characters introduced in the books, and only a handful of them really got added into the games. And I want to start with Henry and Charlie, because I think out of all the characters in the books that, you know, eventually get introduced in the games, they are the more important ones. Obviously, like I mentioned, William Afton kind of gets introduced in here, but technically he was already in the games, so whatever, but we'll talk about him later. So Henry and Charlie, they really only show up in one game, and that's Pizzeria Simulator. Now, Henry gets a name mention in Secret of the Mimic, which I thought was kind of cool. And Charlie is retconned into the previous games. And yes, it is a retcon. She was never meant to be the puppet from the start, but that's a whole nother can of worms, and I'll make a different video on that at some point, but that's not for this video. So they get introduced in Pizza Sim. That's really the main thing I want to talk about here. And sometimes I feel like maybe my complaint with them being introduced in Pizza Sim is taken as a thing of like, I didn't want more characters introduced, or like they shouldn't have been introduced in the games. And I don't know if people actually think that, but to clarify, I actually like that they got introduced in the games. I think that that's really cool. It's cool to see these characters from the books brought over to the games in a somewhat cool way. Charlie's a little bit questionable, but Henry, I think, is very pivotal, especially to the books. His connection with William Afton, the fact that he initially was the guy who made everything, and he was like the inventor and the genius and that kind of stuff. And I think him as a character definitely needed to be in the games in some way, shape, or form. He was definitely important. Now, the problem that arises from these characters, slash specifically Henry being introduced in the games, is less about them being introduced and more about how it was done. So having Henry show up in Pizzeria Simulator is fine, but he kind of just is there. Like, he just shows up and he doesn't get a name drop unless I think you find one of like the secret tapes or something like that. But like in the actual like game, when you just play through it, he doesn't get a name drop. He doesn't say like, it's me, Henry. I mean, obviously that'd be dumb if he said it like that, but you know what I mean? Like he doesn't get a name drop. So in reality, you don't even know that it's Henry. The only like part in the actual like start to finish game without any of the other secrets that like kind of hints towards him being Henry is the line, you know, don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. And that's really about it. Outside of that, you don't really know that this guy is supposed to be Henry. Now, obviously it is. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, well, is it? No, like, obviously it is. But I think the problem arises with the fact that it was just a poor introduction. He just shows up out of nowhere, and we have to come up with reasons as to why he's really done absolutely nothing for the past, like, 30 years. He's just sat around and done nothing. And people explain that away through grief and stuff like that. I think there are better explanations, like the fact that William Afton was trapped in a back room for like 30 years. So it doesn't really seem like Henry would need to do anything if William Afton's trapped. I think that's a much better excuse. But the idea is that like he just kind of sat around for a long time and then eventually went, okay, I guess William Afton's back. I'll build a big place to burn down. And that's really like about it. Like that's really all we know about him in the games. So I think the problem that I have with how he was introduced is that he really wasn't introduced. He was just kind of there. There wasn't like a thing of like, hey, well, actually he's been here and he's done this. He just kind of shows up. And I think it's sort of the same thing with like the Mimic. I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. But like that this character that's important to things just kind of shows up and has no explanation about why they're there. And obviously you don't need that like served up on a silver platter, but I just think that's kind of a big thing for me is they're just kind of like Henry's just kind of thrown in there. And then like I said, Charlie's a whole nother can of worms, but I don't really feel like talking about that in this video since it's such a larger topic. I'm gonna save it for a separate, maybe like a sort of add-on video, if you will. So that's it for Henry. I just kind of wanted to talk about that. The next thing I think is probably the more important thing is our good, not friend William Afton. He's not good, but you know what I mean. So William Afton, he gets name dropped and he gets sort of like his personality introduced in the books. And in the Silver Eyes, he's got an actually kind of cool personality. Well, you see, I say the word cool, but I don't know how to word it, okay? But he's a cool villain. He's a cool villain. Not the fact that he's killing people, but just you get what I'm saying. He's written in a very creepy and cool way that works out really well as a villain. And then you get to the other two books, and this is where the problem arises. The other two books turn him into an actual Scooby-Doo supervillain, like straight up Scooby-Doo supervillain who's like, I was the villain all along, and he goes on a big Scooby-Doo chase. Like, what the heck happened? He just turns into a goofball, and you can really tell that affects the games because one, Sister Location turns him into a mad scientist, and then two, Pizzeria Simulator turns him into a big goofball where he's like sprouting out pickup lines in the vents, and he's like, how can I resist a promise such as this? And he's just super weird, and it's like, what the heck happened? Oh, I know what happened. The books freaking happened. So I think the William Afton downfall, to kind of sum it up kind of short here since it could also probably be its own video, the problem with William Afton in the books is that he's not a character, he's not a person, he's not a villain, he's just a big goofball, and he's just kind of an idiot. And he's written so horribly, and then that gets translated over to the games, and then he becomes even more of an idiot, and it's just really weird. And I don't know why they would do that, because they had a decent villain and then they just turn him into a dummy. I don't know, it's weird. I don't know why they did that in the books, and then it gets brought over to the games. But I think that's kind of the biggest problem that come out of William Afton in the books is just his shift in personality to like whatever the heck happened to him. So that's kind of it for William Afton. Like I said, I'm trying to kind of keep this concise. So that's it for William Afton. And then next up we have like the concepts and ideas and stuff like that. And that includes stuff like the sound illusion discs and robo people and stuff like that. And I think those are really dumb. Those are about on par, if not a little bit better than stuff that you see in like Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex in terms of ideas. But I think the ultimate problem that comes out of these is in the books, I mean, it's really bad, but like at least they try to explain it away somehow. In the games, sound illusion discs never show up. They just don't show up in the games. And then robo people also don't really show up in the games like at all. But everybody wants there to, or thinks that there should be, or like, I don't know, MATPAT's talking about Gregory being a robot. That was the whole thing for a while. And then now people want like, well, I keep saying people want, the idea floating around was that maybe Vanessa in the movies was a robot, which is also probably not true. So everybody's like looking around and pointing fingers at people being robots, and it all stems from these books. And I think that's a big problem because I really don't think anybody's a robot. Why would we want robot people? We don't need that. So I think there's a very big problem that comes out of this, and there could be a lot more, but I think what it really comes down to is a lot of the ideas and concepts in these books are just so outlandish that like they just don't show up in the games. But people are still like looking for them to show up in the games, and they're going mad because they're trying to figure out how this fits into the games. And it's like, come on, can we just leave the robo people to the books and like just not worry about it? So that's kind of my, I guess, idea about some of the problems that came out of the novel trilogy. I hope that kind of made some sense. You know, I'm kind of ranting and rambling, so I hope that made a little bit of sense. And yeah, anyway, that's kind of about it for this section. Like I said, these are sort of short, like almost like mini videos combined into one. There's a bug flying around here. But yeah, these are like mini videos combined into one. And so I guess this is kind of it for video number 1, if you will. So that's it for the novel trilogy. As a whole, I think the problems to come out of this were pretty drastic, but at this point don't really matter anymore. So I think as a whole, the novel trilogy, it's like, is it a problem anymore? Not really. I don't think it's a big problem anymore. It was at the time, and then now it's sort of not as much. The robo people maybe, but outside of that, not really that big of a problem. So that's it for this, and now we'll move on to Fazbear Frights, where it's gonna be probably a little bit shorter since there's less to talk about, but there will be a positive in the next section. Oh, Fazbear Frights. These books, as I like to say here on the channel, are something else. They are full of some of the worst ideas I think I've ever seen or heard in my entire life. We'll start with the positive, though. I was going to start with the negative, but I think maybe we should start with the positive just because I want something positive in here. So the positive idea to come out of this, I think, even though that's kind of the exact opposite, is agony. Agony is a big thing in Fazbear Frights. It gets drawn out through the epilogues and kind of gets brought up here and there. And I think as a concept in FNAF, like at this point, it would be kind of weird if you talked about this in like the FNAF 2 days, where it's like, oh, FNAF 2 just came out. Agony, what the heck are you talking about? But like nowadays, you have Remnant, you got all this kind of stuff. So agony, I think, is kind of actually cool, where it's this idea of almost possession, just without the actual spirit, and basically just turns whatever it's, I guess, quote unquote possessing into basically just a rage monster, just a mindless killing machine. And I think that that could be really cool to apply to other characters or things in the games. For example, the Blob, I think, could really work well as some sort of agony creature. Oh my word, the bug's freaking bag. Anyway, it could work really well as some sort of agony creature where the Blob has the agony that's left over from the Pizza Sim fire, where all the spirits moved on, but the agony of those events remained. And so now it's just this tangled mess of animatronic parts and wires and agony, and it's just this mindless machine bent on just basically killing everything it sees. I think that could work really cool. So that's a cool, positive way that you could use a really negative agony kind of a thing. I think another thing could also be explaining away the Shadow animatronics as some sort of agony version of said animatronics, like Shadow Freddy, Shadow Bonnie. I don't know why I hesitated on that one. And then you get like the Puppet and Balloon Boy, and that could also explain away them as like being agony versions of everything. So I think agony as a whole is a really cool concept to come out of these books. But that's kind of where the cool stuff ends, because everything else except for the story coming home and some other stories in here are really like just atrociously bad, like just downright terrible. There's some absolutely mind-blowingly awful stories and ideas and concepts to come out of these books that I'm surprised they even got allowed past the reading with eyes phase. Like, who sat down to like revise this thing and read this story and then said, I'm giving my thumbs up on this? And there's some stories I'm surprised Scott even gave the thumbs up on. It's just outlandish. Some examples: you have the Springtrap pregnancy story, which I, in a previous take of this section, a previous take of this, I discovered that the character in said story, his name is actually Matt. So you have Matt who gets basically pregnant by Springtrap. That's absolutely no coincidence. That's absolutely that MATPAT picture, like 100%. That's 100% why they made that story. It's so outlandishly dumb. Another stupid concept they came up with, and this one I actually had to sit through. I didn't read the Springtrap story because like it's really bad and I don't want to read it. One story that I sat through because I didn't know how bad it was, there's a concept where a person gets turned into one of those neon green kids at play sign, you know, the ones that are like on the side of the road that have like the flag and they're like, drive slow, there's kids playing. Somebody turns into one of those. I don't know who was like laying in bed one night, tossing and turning, and went, aha, eureka, I have a great idea that works for Five Nights at Freddy's. What if somebody turned into a neon green kids at play sign? Like, what the heck? Anyway, I'll stop criticizing them here. I made a whole nother video on all these books, but basically the point I'm trying to get at is there were so many terrible ideas brought up in these books that I think the problem from them is nothing to do with them getting introduced in the games, like Fazgoo, time traveling ball pits, people getting transformed into things. I don't think is like gonna be in the games like at all, because it's just so outlandishly dumb. It's just a strictly book series thing. So fortunately that's not going to be part of the games. However, I think since some of these stories are just so outlandish, all their wild ideas can be brought into the games and people will just kind of ignore it because it's like, hey, well, at least it's not as bad as that. An example I bring up is the reality warping mask from Ruin. For those of you who have been on the channel for a while, you know how much I hate this because it sounds like something straight out of the books. You can phase through walls, you can go through like singing time bending portal doors. It's so outlandishly bad. But then when you compare it to something like Fazgoo, you're like, all right, well, it's really not that bad. So I think what the problem I have with these ideas is that just by comparison, these ideas are so bad that you can just get away with introducing whatever other kind of crazy ideas you want in the games. Just as long as they're not as bad as these in Fazbear Frights, you can kind of get away with it because by comparison, they'll be infinitely better than anything in these books. So I think at the end of the day, the ultimate problem I have with these books is just that. Like, there's just so many stupid things in here that you can just kind of get away with anything you want in the games. So like, they affect the games in the way of dumb ideas, and that's really about all I have to say about these books. I wanted to keep this section kind of short because there wasn't as much I wanted to talk about, and I kind of summed it up a little bit better. But before we move on to Tales from the Pizzaplex, I did want to bring up one more thing. I think it's the dumbest thing in the world. So you have I had to bring this up when talking about these books. So in the epilogues, you have Dr. I think it's Taggart, and he creates the Stitch Wraith and then he dies. But then later in the book, you get Dr. Talbert, and he does the exact same thing, but he just has a different name. He was best friends with Taggart too, for some reason. They're like the same. They're literally the same person. I just think it's funny that there's these two people who have like almost the same name, and then but they're supposed to be two different people. It's so wild and dumb. But anyway, I had to bring that up. But next up, we'll move on to Tales from the Pizzaplex, and this one, like I said, will be a little bit different. So it'll be more talking about the whole canon debate, which shouldn't be a debate anymore since Secret of the Mimic kind of you know, made it clear that those books aren't canon. But we'll talk about that there. And yeah, I'm just gonna go over the whole canon thing with the books. So on to that section. Alright, so Tales from the Pizzaplex. Now, for this one, I kind of want to go through a bunch of the whole canon debate, and I don't really have a particular order that I'm going to go through things on here for, but I have a couple different topics all fitting under the whole canonicity thing that I want to talk about. Now, obviously, first things first, these books are not canon, confirmed to be not canon thanks to Secret of the Mimic. Now, there are some tie-in, like, because it's Secret of the Mimic is obviously inspired by some of the books, but they aren't the same. And the books are no longer canon, thankfully, and I don't think they ever were, but we'll get to that. But thankfully, it's way different enough to be distinctly non-canon. So anybody who's still out there being like, well, there might be the possibility that the books are still canon, they aren't, like, at all. And there's a lot of things to go off of that. I'll just bring up the biggest one that I know of, and that's the whole Fiona thing. How in the books, she's described to have died during childbirth. In the games, she seems to have died around the time that David was 3, based off of the videos that we see while going through Edwin's house. So seemingly that's when she dies at the Fall Fest fire, which we know that's also where she dies, because that, you know, it's a very prevalent thing. And so it's a very different situation for her. Now, there was one video I was watching that was kind of talking about a very similar topic here, and that guy was talking about how some people were trying to explain it away that, like, Fiona did die during childbirth, but that there's a so that Edwin made a mimic of her, and then that's the one that died at Fall Fest. But, like, come on, people. If you just look at the game, you can easily tell that that's just not true, like, at all. So there's no debate that that's a very different thing, and it could be a retcon from the books, but I think it's clear, just based off of the game, that it's a distinctly different thing. The games and the books are not connected. Thank the heavens that they aren't, because it's not very good. And I think to kind of move into another section here, since we just talked about why, at least one example about why they aren't canon, I want to move into sort of where this idea came from and why these books were never going to be canon in the first place, no matter what people said. So I think where this whole debate started was, I think it was Scott Cawthon. Don't quote me on this, but from what I've seen and found, it seems like Scott said something about some of these stories in Tales from the Pizza Plugs being canon, and then people kind of took that as like some of these stories are canon, which makes sense because that's what Scott said. Now, I don't know what he said exactly. I don't have his words. I haven't found it. But that's what I've sort of seen floating around, is that it started with Scott. And so people took that and they're trying to figure it out and they're trying to do all this kind of stuff. But I think what ultimately happened is I think we got another mic trap situation. Now, if you don't know the mic trap situation, I'll explain it here briefly. Basically, what happened in Sister Location is we see Michael Afton. We get confirmed that it's Michael Afton. His name is Michael, and he calls William Afton Dad. So it's Michael Afton. And he gets scooped. Ennard, you know, wears him as a suit. And then eventually he turns into an actual purple guy and spits up Ennard. And now he's just purple guy, who looks almost the exact same as actual purple guy, right? In all the like FNAF 2 stuff. He looks like purple guy because he's a purple guy. And then at the end of the custom night cutscene thing, you know, where Michael's like, it's me, Michael, father, I'm gonna come find you. And then Springtrap walks out. It's Springtrap walking out as Michael Afton says, I'm gonna come find you, which insinuates that it's Springtrap leaving to go find somebody. Now, obviously, that's not true, but Sister Location gave off a lot of vibes that maybe Michael Afton is Purple Guy and Springtrap, which we know is not true, but at the time you look at the information, you can see why some people would be convinced. And then Scott kind of realized his mistake and went like, oh, shoot, that's not really what I was going for. I gotta right my wrongs. And so he made Pizzeria Simulator have a lot of things that are like, William Afton is just called William Afton. He's not called Scrab Trap or all this kind of stuff. Like, he is, but he's also just called Afton, right? Like, especially in Ultimate Custom Night, his name's just Afton. He's William Afton. And it's, like, very spelled out for us. So it's to kind of put this thing to rest. It's not Michael Afton, like, hey, it's William Afton, put things to rest once and for all. I think we've kind of had the same thing here, where either Scott's vision for the books changed to the point where he was like, I said these were canon, but they aren't, or he misspoke, or something came up, something got misinterpreted, something like that. I don't know all the details, but I think somewhere down the line, he changed or wanted to correct something in regards to the books, and so then Secret of the Mimic was made especially to the point to show that, hey, these books aren't canon. I kind of think that's what we saw. So it's like another mic trap situation. We had some games and some books come out where it's like, hey, this is what they're pointing at. And then Scott had to be like, hey, you know, hey, Steel Wool, this is the story I'm going for. Can we make sure that this is confirming that the books are not canon? I kind of think we had another Pizzeria Simulator-esque situation here with Secret of the Mimic. So I kind of think that's ultimately what happened situation-wise. And so I don't necessarily blame fans or anything for believing that some of these stories were canon, because if that's what Scott said, then you're going to kind of go off of that, since he's the guy who's coming up with all the stories. So you would think that like it would make sense. It makes sense that some people would believe that. Now, there's two issues I have with this, and this is kind of where the problem, I guess you could say, comes into play here. The problems I have with both of these, and there's a problem with Scott / fans, and then there's another problem that's more dedicated to just fans, and we'll start with that one. So the biggest problem I kind of have is why the heck some of these people would want these stories to be canon in the first place. Like, I know that they said only some of these stories are canon, but they were never confirmed which ones were. And as far as I can tell, all of these stories are pretty just trash. I haven't read them all. I've read one, but they're pretty much just Fazbear Fright stories again, as far as I can tell. So all the stories that I know from these books are like atrociously bad. And I guess that's just my opinion, right? Other people can say that they really like the stories. If you guys like the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories, all power to you. Like I said, I haven't read them. Maybe they're better. From what I know, they seem really bad. But that's just my opinion. But my thing is, like, why would you want these to be canon in the first place? Like, let's say, for example, the first story that's in the whole Tales from the Pizzaplex, books. Let's say that first story was one of the ones that was canon. You really want a junkyard trash scrap robot being held together by a remnant necklace, which is from the Fazbear Frights books, which connects them to there, also making them not canon. But the heart-shaped pendant necklace made of remnant that keeps this robot together, who's pretending to be a girl, who goes around and helps people, but then she goes to the school dance with Bobber, and then Bobber goes in for a kiss, and then instead of some tongue-on-tongue action, there's a little bit of motor oil in his mouth, and then she runs away, and then she turns back into a big pile of scrap. You really want that to be in the FNAF games? Like, I don't. Like, I don't, because that's dumb. And I think that's kind of my biggest thing is, like, people are like, hey, we want these stories to be canon. But, like, why? Because they're dumb. Why would you want these to be canon? Like, I think the ultimate problem is people didn't want the stories. They wanted some of the characters and the events to be canon, which I think is why Secret of the Mimic is kind of a thing. To be like, hey, some of these characters are canon, and some of these events are canon. Some of the better things from Tales of the Pizzaplex are canon, but those books and stories aren't. I kind of think that's what the purpose was, which I'm ultimately fine with, because I think there were some fine ideas in there. I don't mind there being somebody else who was making stuff for Freddy's. I don't mind there being that kind of thing. I kind of like the Mimic. Edward was better, but I don't mind the Mimic. Like, so there's these things from the books that I don't mind, and I think are fine being translated over into canon, but there's a difference between liking characters and elements and then wanting the entire story to be brought over. Because, like, I heard people wanted the freaking Bobby Dots to be canon. You want the anime girl Bobby Dots to be canon? I don't know if they're anime girls. That's kind of how they're somewhat described and portrayed, but I haven't read the story. I think that maybe they aren't that way, but, like, you really want these things to be canon? Because, like, I don't. And those stories are also really bad. And those are ones that I kind of know. So I think the biggest thing for me is just like, why? Why would we want these to be canon of the games? Like, have them be in the books? Okay, because they're the books. You can just ignore them. If they're in the games, it kind of ruins everything. So I think that's kind of my biggest thing and biggest problem with the community as to wanting these books to be canon. I don't see why. But moving on to the other problem that I have with the community, but also with Scott, it kind of ties in here, is only wanting some of these stories to be canon, whereas other ones aren't, even though they're all part of the same interconnected story book universe. You can't do that. That's not how the Force works. You can't just say some stories in this series are canon and other ones aren't. That's not how storytelling works. If you have a story that's part of an interconnected like a larger interconnected story, you can't just say that this one's canon but then the larger interconnected story isn't. That's not how that works. You can't do that, like, at all. And even if that's what Scott says, he's the one making the stories, he's the one okaying the books. that doesn't freaking matter. You can't just say that, because that's not how storytelling works, like, at all. And to use a couple examples that I had just thought of on the fly in the first take, but now I'm, you know, actually integrating here. The first one I thought of was the whole DC universe reboot, where James Gunn is keeping some stuff from the old DC universe and bringing it over. And it's like, he replaced the scene at the end of I think it's Peacemaker season 1. I don't know anything about these shows, like, at all, so if I get information wrong, then just correct me. But he replaced the scene where the Justice League shows up with, like, his new, I don't know what happened there, the Justice Gang or whatever, and they show up and he, like, replaced the scene. So it's like, oh, hey, he fixed it. Oh, like that, just in a snap, you know, like Mr. Clean, like, he just fixed it. But then it's like, but that's not really how that works, because these characters aren't part of this universe. Like, if it's supposed to connect to the Suicide Squad movie where Peacemaker also shows up and Harley Quinn's there, but she's the Harley Quinn from the DCEU, the old one with Henry Cavill. Like, she's that Harley Quinn. She's not the other one. So you can't just take it and move it to somewhere else. Like, I think that's kind of dumb, because that's not how storytelling works. You can't just take one thing from somewhere else and add it into something new. I think another example, one that I would probably know a little bit more about, and this isn't like a direct example, this is more like a theoretical example, if you will, would be like, look at the Star Wars sequels, okay? Let's say that somebody's like, hey, The Force Awakens, it's not the worst movie in the world. I think it's okay. Let's keep that one. But then the other two we'll just ignore. You can't do that. You can't just be like, oh, well, they're all part of the story, but I don't like this one, so I'm not going to include it. Or if you do, like, I guess maybe let's just do just the first 6. If you're like, hey, I like the first 6 Star Wars movies, but let's just take out episode 1 because I'm not a big Jar Jar Binks fan, so let's just ixnay that movie and just keep, like, 2 through 6 or something like that. Like, you can't really do that because you're cutting out a big chunk of the story that's part of an interconnected story. Like, you can't just, like, pick and choose, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you can't pick and choose what you want if they're all connected, if that makes sense. So I guess moral of the story, the biggest thing, no matter who's saying it, if they're the person who's, like, coming up with these ideas, the person who's okaying these ideas, anything like that, no matter who it is, Scott Cawthon, the community, theorists, whoever, you can't just pick and choose what you want from stories, because that's not how that works, like, at all. If it's part of an interconnected story, you can't pluck it out and put it somewhere else. So that was always my biggest confusion with this whole, like, the book should be canon kind of a thing, because you either have to not have any of them be canon or have all of the stories be canon. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have both. You can't have some stories be canon and some of them not be. So that was my biggest thing with these books, and that was my ultimate problem with these books, is basically nothing to do with the books, but all the stuff surrounding the series of books. It's just a big problem that thankfully is hopefully gone, because Secret of the Mimic came out and basically said that the books aren't canon, you know? So hopefully this is a problem we can put behind us and we don't have to worry about it anymore. But I just felt it was only fair to bring it up if I'm, you know, talking about the books. So anyway, that's really about all I have for Tales from the Pizzaplex. Again, I haven't read them. I don't plan on reading them. I already suffered enough brain damage reading Fazbear Frights. I can't bear to go through that again. I just can't. So please forgive me for not reading them, but I'm not going to. So anyway, that's going to be it for this section, and really all I had to talk about. This next section, we're going to do the character encyclopedia, like a little mini review. I hope you enjoy it. It's a bit of fun, and yeah, we're just gonna go right into that. So enjoy. All right, well, hi guys. I'm doing a little bit of, well, I was going to talk like this. I'm doing a little bit of in-person stuff here, you know, because we're checking out the book. I bought it, hardcover. It was the cheapest option. It was like 15 bucks for this, or like 30 something bucks for the paperback. Like, I'm just going to get the hardcover. But I just thought it'd be fun to tack on a little bit of a a review of this book, go over some of the major, maybe not major, but there's a lot of things wrong with this. So I've just picked out a few. You can probably see some of these sticky notes up here. I picked out just a few problems with this that I thought I'd go over. Some of them are like less serious than others. Some of them are more serious. And I just thought I'd talk about this because I think this is probably the worst FNAF book to ever exist. First of all, I mean, just look at this cover. It's like Markiplier UCN, like thumbnail style. And that's kind of an insult to those. Like, this is just a very bland cover. And the back's not much better. Like, I just don't know what's going on here. But that aside, we'll get into it. Another major thing I'm not sure about. So here it has Cawthon, obviously for Scott Cawthon. But I don't know who wrote this. It doesn't really say who wrote the book. It says that the cover design is by Jeff... Hang on, I'm getting a glare. By Jeff Shake. But I don't know who actually wrote the book. So that's another thing. But anyway, let's actually get into thing and let's start talking about some of the issues that I have. I have them all split up here. So first, I'll actually show you guys the table of contents because it's kind of fun. They have these little like pictures down here, these little like cartoon, you know, versions of the characters, which I think is pretty fun. My boy, hang on, my boy Toy Bonnie looking as snazzy as ever. So it's kind of fun. And then you get into the actual book. They go through the different things. Our first person up on the thing here, the first character we're going to be talking about is Golden Freddy. This is the first one that I had somewhat of an issue with. Nothing to do with what's brought up in the small amount of information that they give you, which is mostly just how they work in the game. So it's not really a character encyclopedia, it's a gameplay encyclopedia. So that's one thing. But aside from that, if you look at this little box, hang on, I'm not used to this. You see this little data file box here? And you get like name, type, and then game appearances. Well, if you guys know anything about FNAF, you should know that Golden Freddy also shows up in numerous books. Particularly the Silver Eyes, and they also show up in at least one Fazbear Fright story as like a main part of it. Not mentioned here. I don't know if they forgot or what happened, but it's not mentioned here. Also, Fredbear is not brought up in this, so it's not like there's another section where it's like, oh, well, maybe Fredbear has it. He's not brought up in this book. So that's a pretty big thing, just missing appearances. Outside of that, another thing they mention, him showing up in Sister Location. I don't know if you guys can see that. Here, it says Sister Location, right down there. I don't know if you guys can see that. Hang on, right there, Sister Location. If you guys should know that Golden Freddy doesn't show up in there. And Yendo doesn't count because Yendo gets his own page, I think. I don't know. Does Yendo get his own page? I don't remember. But Golden Freddy doesn't show up in Sister Location. So, yeah, that's a pretty big thing too. So Golden Freddy has a lot of appearances issues. But that's about it for Golden Freddy. Not much else. Our next character, Blacklight Freddy, is actually a very interesting one. So it says that their appearances are Help Wanted and FNAF AR. And they have a little bit of a text block thing here that talks about how Blacklight Freddy and the other Blacklight animatronics all show up in Help Wanted. That they actually appear in the game, and that you can unlock the Blacklight mode by winning Help Wanted. That is all just completely wrong information. All of that is completely false. That's just, none of that's true. They're talking about the little lever that you pull to do the hard mode versions. That's the Blacklight they're talking about. You don't win that by winning the game. You get that at the start, and Blacklight Freddy doesn't show up. There is a character later on that will fit into this line of Blacklight animatronics that actually contradicts everything on this page. We'll get to them. But at least 3 out of the 4 main Blacklight animatronics all say that they show up in the game, and they give you fake and false information. So it's not super serious because it's like just a random character, but I still think the fact that they're just giving you wrong information in the book is a pretty big deal. So that one kind of caught me off guard. That one was kind of pretty major. Next up is the one that probably everybody knows about. I'm sure you guys even probably, like, not to, that wasn't supposed to be like a knowledge insult. I'm sure you guys know about this. The Bonnet, who's the first female Bonnie version. So I think it's interesting how people word it, because whenever I heard it before, it was like that the Bon page said that Bon was the first, and then the Bonnet page also said that Bonnet was the first, and that they were kind of contradictory there. But the Bonnet page is the only one that's contradictory, because Bon's page doesn't mention anything about Bon being a girl, as in like any terms of like actual importance. They just refer to her as a like her and she throughout the entire section, but they don't mention like, hey, Bon's the first or anything like that. It's in the Bonnet section where they mention that, you know, hey, Bonnet's the first, I think it's in that top paragraph, that she's the first female Bonnie. So it's really just Bonnet's page that does the contradicting. Outside of that, it's really just nothing too I mean, it's nothing too crazy, but just contradictory information on the Bonnet page. I don't need to go over that much more. You guys should already all know about that. What else do we have? Oh, here we go. This is more of a fun one. They put sea Bonnies in here. Anyway, so there's a little story synopsis down here. What is it called? In Too Deep. And they talk about Rory and Mott, and how Rory's a younger brother and Mott's the older brother, and how Rory buys the sea Bonnie eggs as a part of a plan to take revenge on his mean brother Mott. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've read this story. That's not true. I'm like 99% sure that's not true. Because one, what is Rory going to do with them to take revenge? They're like psychic in the book, but like Rory doesn't know that. He's just a kid. I'm fairly certain he buys or wins them at Freddy's, and then he just keeps them because he thinks they're cool. And then they start going up against Mott and like attacking him psychically after he insults them. So that's also wrong. Like, it's not like important information at all. We're talking about freaking sea Bonnies here. But I just thought that was interesting that they put more wrong information in here. You're going to see that as a common trend, that wrong information tends to show up quite a bit in this book. Next up, Spring Bonnie. There wasn't too much on here that I wanted to bring up in terms of anything notable and like wrong information or stuff like that. First of all three of these pictures are absolutely atrociously terrible. None of them look like Spring Bonnie. They all look like Pit Bonnie, who this one is particularly Pit Bonnie. I don't know why, because we're supposed to be looking at Spring Bonnie, who's just like fixed up Springtrap. None of these look like fixed up Springtrap, and I don't know what they were thinking with this. Like, I don't like any of these. I think they all look really not good. I don't like any of these pictures. Information wise, there was one thing I wanted to bring up. This paragraph down here. It mentions Spring Bonnie being one of a small number of Springlock suits, which Secret of the Mimic just sort of got rid of, because there's like a gazillion Springlock suits. So, yeah, that's now also false information. It probably wasn't when this book was coming out, but that's now false information that they decided to overwrite, which I don't know why they did that with Secret of the Mimic, but that's a whole nother topic. But I just thought I'd bring that up, how there's only a small number of Springlock suits. Not anymore. So that's the Spring Bonnie page. Which one do I have next? Alright, this one's next. This one, Blacklight Foxy. This ties into, obviously, Blacklight Freddy. The important thing with this one is, if you look at appearances and paragraph and stuff up here, he doesn't appear anywhere. And this paragraph particularly says that Blacklight Foxy was part of the Blacklight animatronics, and how they were supposed to show up in Help Wanted, but they didn't. They never showed up in the game. Which means that they just contradicted every other Blacklight animatronic page, because they all say that they did show up, that they were there. You just gotta find them and win the game in order to unlock them or something. But this one says that they didn't. And this is the only one that's actually, like, factually true information. So, there's that. I just thought it was interesting that they decided to do that. Also, here's Grim Foxy, because he's cool. What do I have up next? Phantom Puppet. This one, there's not too much to talk about on this one. I just thought it was interesting. So down here, they talk about how Phantom Puppet shows up on the cameras. But they talk about how the puppet that we see on camera 08, where we think it's all the real puppet, is actually not the real puppet, but some sort of apparition of Phantom Puppet, but like looks like the real one. So I think that's interesting. That they basically just said that that's not the real puppet, which would mean that the puppet wasn't at the FNAF 3 location. So I think that's a little bit interesting. I don't think that's true, but, you know, I don't think anything in this book is true except for that Blacklight Foxy page, but, you know, that's a whole nother can of worms. What do I have next? I don't want to miss anything. Oh, this is my favorite one. Look at my boy Endo01. He gets 2 pages. He gets 2 pages. Endo01 gets 2 pages. Everything on here is pretty fine. You get some of the weird dialogue. I'll touch on it when I get to it. My Endo's got no nose. How does it smell? It doesn't. Who the heck wrote that? That's the most stupid crap I've ever seen in my life. But there's one particular thing I think that is interesting about this page. Why is Endo02 on my Endo01 page? Now you might be thinking to yourself, all right, well, Ryan, maybe they're combining all the endos into one page. You know, maybe they put Endo01, but they meant all the endos. Maybe. Endo02. Who's got this really cute picture? I mean, look at him. He's so cute. But, like, he's got his own page. So why does he have a picture on Endo01's page? They could have put the one from the cameras back here where he's sitting on the table. But instead they decided to just put a picture of Endo02 on his page. I don't know why. I don't know if that was like a mistake. Like, I don't know. But they did it. So I think that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I thought that one was kind of funny. That's my favorite one. I just was looking through it. I just was reading through the book and then I just see that and I'm like, what the heck? What do we have next? Ooh. Look at how much information is given to us about our main antagonist, Springtrap. Now, to be fair, William Afton does get his own section a little bit later in the book. But, like, come on. We're talking about Springtrap here. And they gave us, Springtrap looks like Spring Bonnie, but he's a bit beat up. And he's scary. And then they say that he just shows up in a bunch of the games. Like, yeah, no duh, Sherlock. He shows up in a bunch of the games because he's the villain. Like, give me more information about this guy. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, they just don't give him any information here. Like, he gets 1 page. And then they give Dark Springtrap a page, which, like, he needed, like, a footnote. Also, they got his design wrong. They gave him the little pelvic plate. He doesn't have that. He lost that. So they got that wrong. I just don't know why they only gave... Like, they gave Endo01 and Endo02 2 pages, which is, like, good for them. But, like, you could have given Springtrap some pages. Showed him a little bit of love. Alright, who do we got next? Hang on. It's so hard to tell. I didn't have a good system to actually organize these sticky notes. Alright, it looks like this is next. Montgomery Gator. It looks like Montgomery Gator is next. There's not too much on this one that I have any issues with. What I wanted to bring up, and like I said, this isn't very trustworthy information. What I wanted to bring up, though, is they gave an entire paragraph to the Bonnie mystery on Montgomery Gator's page. So, while the information, you know, there's a lot of correct information in this book, so this could be correct. But take everything with a grain of salt. But I think it's very interesting that that people are still saying that Montgomery Gator did not kill Bonnie. I think it's interesting that they decided to put Bonnie's thing on Montgomery Gator's page. Interesting. I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Trash in the Gang. This is what I wanted to talk about as well. I don't know if you guys can see it well. I'll try. It's a little hard to do on the camera. Also, it's in my laptop camera, so it's already a little bit bad. But it's one of the most pixelated pictures I've ever seen. I could do better in 10 seconds. It's like super pixelated. So that was one thing. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is the little paragraph. They called our man Pan Stan boring. They said, oh, well, he's the boring one. Why are you insulting Pan Stan like that? What did he do to you? That's just a little bit of a side tangent. There's like nothing wrong with that page, but I just wanted to talk about that. These ones, kind of a similar deal. This guy's picture, absolutely atrociously pixelated. The biggest thing I wanted to talk about with these two Springtrap got 1 page. Why does Little Joe get a page? Why does Magician, this little guy who sits there and does absolutely nothing, get a page? Why did we take away these pages and give them to the actually important characters? Like, I don't know. Why are we including AR skins in here too when we could have given, like, Springtrap more pages and information? Like, give more information than 2 paragraphs and call it a day. Like, look, they didn't even have enough info to actually fill out this guy's page. Like, why make a page on him? I don't know. I just think it's weird that we decided to, well, not we, but, you know, they decided to make this book and give pages to these characters when we could have gotten more information about our actually, like, important characters. I don't know. I think it's just a baffling decision, and I'll talk about that in a second. But up next, we finally got our boy Willie A, and look how much information he has. Basically nothing. The main antagonist gets basically nothing, and all this does, this whole section, is just the little intro dialogue from Sister Location. This tiny little paragraph up here talks about how he killed some people in FNAF 2, and then hides in the Spring Bonnie suit and dies in FNAF 3, and then he also says hi in FNAF 4. Cool. Thanks for that. And then it also gives us a little blurb that he shows up in the books. There's a surprisingly lacking amount of information about book characters in here, like, at all. They just have them there. Also, dude, your brain is showing. Who wrote this? Like, this is embarrassingly bad. Also, like, the next page, we get Burn Trap in the Blob. Obviously, that's not their real canonical names, apparently. Burn Trap, I feel like, is at this point, because he's not got anything else. The Blob is Tangle, but we're not here for the Blob. We're here about Burn Trap. In this whole section down here, basically just confirms that he's William Afton, and that Glitch Trap's William Afton. Now, like I said, obviously, everything in this book needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But I do think it's interesting, like the Bonnie information on Montgomery Gator's page, that they would put this in here because everybody's like, it's the Mimic, or it's not William Afton. It is. And I wholeheartedly believe Burn Trap and Glitch Trap are William Afton. They tell you that here. Obviously, I don't know if this is true, but there's a lot of evidence outside of this book. But I think this is just one more thing that you can be like, maybe. Like, it could be also be wrong, like the whole Blacklight animatronics, but, you know, this is something to consider. We only got 2 more points that I want to talk about here. 2 more book characters. Take a look at this. Look at how many book pictures there are of Charlie. All 3 pictures of Charlie are of book Charlie. And there's a little bit of information here. There's more than William Afton had. How much of this, of all of the text on these 2 pages, how much of this do you think is from the book? Like, is talking about Charlie from the books? I'll give you a little hint. That's it. Everything else on these 2 pages is just talking about her showing up in Pizza Sim, and then her potentially showing up in other games, and that's about it. Well, not even potentially, her being retconned in other games, and then that's it. It's all game information, and then one little snippet of in an alternate version of Charlie who survived childhood, which is just wrong because she got killed and then turned into a robot, appears in the novels. That's it. That's all the information they give us, but they gave us 3 pictures of her from the books. Why? I don't know. I think maybe because they're stupid. But, you know, you didn't hear it from me. Actually, you did. And then last up, we got Henry. Obviously, we have to end off on our character Henry here. You guys want to know something funny? I'll let you in on a little secret here. I'll show it to you. That's all the information from the books. Yeah, they don't give you any info, just like Charlie. None of this stuff is from the books. The only thing you get about him being in the books is this little picture and it being Once Upon a Time. That's it. No information about Henry in the books, who actually has more character than he does in the games. Nothing about that. Just game talk where he shows up in Pizza Sim. And that's about it. And that's his only game appearance too. So, I just thought that was interesting. How two of the big characters from the books got like no information, And is this supposed to be... That's all I have. The last 2 pages are Vanny and Gregory, and they're just kind of basic. Is this supposed to be from... No, okay, here, look at this. With over 150 animatronics from the world of Five Nights at Freddy's. So they also include human characters, though. And it's not just the games. Where the heck were the book characters? Where was John? Where was Jessica? Where was all of these book characters that didn't show up in here? Where was Book Circus Baby? Do they... Hang on. Let's find Circus Baby. Where is she? I gotta remember if they even freaking mentioned Book Circus Baby. Oh, Circus Baby. Where are you? Page 156. Alright, let's see if we can find that. Here we go. Circus Baby. Any information from her in the books? Nope. None. No information about her in the books. How sad. Maybe we can see if there's any info on Elizabeth Afton. Maybe there's some from her in the books. Because she also is important in the books. They even say so. She shows up in the 4th closet. Let's see. Oh. Oh, no. There's no information about her in the books. It's all just her from Sister Location and a little bit of Pizza Sim. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know whose bright idea this was. I know this book is out of date. This came out in 2023. That's what the copyright says. I know it's out of date. I know that everybody pretty much should assume that this book is completely useless. I think that's a very good standpoint. I just wanted to actually read it for myself so I can make that judgment, not based on watching other people's content. Not that that's what you are doing, and I'm giving you that information. But I figured actually showing the book off and not just telling you stuff would be more helpful, because you often see in videos where they talk about this thing and they're like, but they don't show anything from the book itself. They just say that this is what shows up in the book. And so then you can assume that they're telling the truth, but you never know. I thought it'd be good to actually just show it off and take a look at it for myself. And I stand to argue that this is the worst FNAF book to exist on the planet. I think that this book is absolutely atrociously bad. And if you want a good laugh and to feel utterly embarrassed after reading this, then I would recommend reading it. You know, I got through the whole thing and I genuinely felt embarrassed for reading this. Not in terms of like, I felt embarrassed that I owned a FNAF book or something like that, because I own another one. Here, I can show it. I don't want to get in the shot. I own the cookbook. Also, here's MATPAT. It's not that I feel embarrassed owning a FNAF book. It's just like, it's so bad. The book is so incredibly bad. Like, it's just embarrassingly bad. And you can't help but just feel bad for the book about how atrocious it is. Like, it's just terrible. So, I guess the moral of the story, if you want information about FNAF characters, you're better off Googling it or using like ChatGPT to look it up. Because this ain't gonna help you. If you want information that you could gather from simply playing the games, I would just recommend doing that. It's a lot more immersive than reading this. Outside of that, if you want a good laugh, you can read this, because I had a good chuckle reading through some of these. So yeah, this is really bad. Like thumbs down, really bad. But yeah, no, this is really bad. That's all I have to really say about this. If you guys are gonna get your information from here, and I know I brought up stuff like the Bonnie and the Burn Trap thing, that's more so just being like, hey, look at what they actually brought up in this book. That wasn't anything to be like, hey, take this with like 100% certainty. And like, a lot of the information they bring up is generally correct, but there's also a lot of wrong and missing information in here. So if you guys are gonna ever plan on like trying to figure out FNAF lore, please don't use this. Don't use this book as any sort of evidence. If I see somebody out there who's like, I saw this information show up in the FNAF encyclopedia, character encyclopedia, so that must mean that it's true, you're wrong, buddy. Like, like, that's rough, buddy. Like, you got it wrong here. This is like the least trustworthy thing. I think you could probably get more like actually useful information by like looking up FNAF memes than you do from this. So that's it. I used up you guys' time enough. This turned into a book review at the end, which is kind of what I wanted to do anyway. So I hope you guys got some good info out of this. I had fun with this. And we'll kind of just go to the outro now, and we'll wrap up the video from there. But yeah, I thought it'd be fun to do a little bit of an in-person section with this. So hope you enjoyed. Hope you had a good chuckle about this book. And yeah, I'll see you in the outro. All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed the video. It's a little bit different, you know, than the last videos I've been doing. It's kind of a little bit weird to get back into the not rewrite groove, even though we're probably going to get back into the rewrite groove. I don't know what the poll said yet as of recording this, but we'll probably get back into the rewrite groove at some point. But it was nice to take a small little break and do something else. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well, and I hope you also enjoyed that last little segment we did there with the covering the FNAF encyclopedia. I hope that you enjoyed that. And speaking of that, I have something a little bit fun that I'm going to plan on doing. So as you guys may or may not know, typically with my rewrite videos, I tend to do like a behind the discussions kind of a video where it's like a bonus, and I talk about behind the scenes things, go over script, go over cut content, stuff like that. But I can't really do that for this video because it's like there's nothing to really do for that. Like, it's just the problems with video. There's not really anything there for behind the scenes. So I think instead what could be fun, I'm looking at the book right now, is if I made a very long, it'll probably be a very long video, but like a very long bonus video where I go through the entire book, every page, every character. I go through it for you guys, and we just go through the entire book. And then that way I can show you guys the entire thing. And if anybody's like, well, you know, what about this or what about that? You didn't show off the entire book. I'll be like, well, I actually made another video where I did show off the entire book. So I think that would be kind of fun, and it'll give me an excuse to go through the book again, because it's a fun read to go through there. So I think that'll be the plan, and stay tuned for that. That'll be out like tomorrow probably, so just stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's really gonna be about it for the video. So with that being said, we'll kind of get into the last little bits of things here. I don't know what I said, but okay. We'll do shameless plugs. Go check them out. The Instagram, Patreon, and second channel stuff is down in the description, and channel membership is also down by the subscribe button. So go check all of those out, especially channel membership and the Patreon. You get some fun perks for joining either or, and some of the fun perks you get for being a channel member are some fun little 8-bit emojis that I make. I've actually made a couple of new ones, well, repurposed assets from a different video into making cool new 8-bit emojis. And so that's some of them. And another thing that you get for being a channel member is a shout out in all of the videos, well, pretty much all the videos. So with that being said, here is the shout out to my current channel members. Thank you guys so much for being my members. It really does just mean the world to me. So thank you so much, and here is your video shout out. And yeah, with that, thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. It was a little bit more of a laid back one, I would almost say, compared to the previous discussion videos we've done. So I hope you enjoyed it. And for your questions of the day, because there's always 2 questions of the day. Question number 1, what do you think of the FNAF books? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Do you don't even care? Just give me your thoughts on the FNAF books down below. And for your second question, what is your favorite kind of cereal and or breakfast food? So those are your 2 questions of the day. Answer them down below if you made it this far in the video. And with that, I will see you in tonight's live stream, where we will be playing some FNAF World. Goodbye.